By the way, if you hold on to the fact that you're able to solve a task well, or do a podcast well, or write code well, in 5 years we are gone. $24 billion model which can fit actually into your graphics card that you can use on a PC, solving JE problems. In fact, we have pipelines to do even voice-to-voice translation, right? So you could take a video that somebody is speaking in Hindi and actually get it spoken in 10 languages in their style, right?
For some reason, that's the first thing gets tested. Same as DeepSeek. People who really want to know what this model is allowed to say and what is not allowed to say.
As I said, right? See, if AI is going to displace jobs, it's primarily because it provides organizations with abilities. They don't need individuals specifically for it. There is more value for domain-specific data. Do we have healthcare data? Do we have enough data about finance? Do you have enough data about legal? We need playbook. What do we do about it? In India, we are touchy about capitalism still. If you look at CCTVs today, I was just discussing with various people, we don't use our chips in CCTVs even. And most of our data probably goes outside. From security cameras, this is the maximum security risk that you can have, right? If indeed this is coming and taking away jobs, we at least need to provide our people the ability to benefit from it. I'm going to give a teaser soon, maybe next week.
Pratyush, welcome to SparX.
Hi Mukesh, great to be here.
Yeah, AI is pretty much, I think, headline news every single day, and you are very much in the middle of that. First of all, congratulations for your new model launch. I think a lot of us in India are looking at it with a lot of excitement, hope, and pride as well. So far the narrative about India hasn't been that great last few years, but very few companies like yourself, Sarvam, probably BharatGen, and a couple of other initiatives are kind of leading the India strategy, and you are definitely at the forefront of it. And you also started, much earlier, long before the so-called GPT movement. So it's great to see, let's start, with from today's situation. This model that you launched, do you think it's at par with, what we are able to access globally?
Firstly, this is the Sarvam M model that we released recently. This is actually a very, very early release that we have done in the sequence of things we will do. The model is very good, but this is a model where we showed how we can do post-training accurately and improve upon models, not just on Indian languages, but also math and programming. So we call it, in fact, it is a model with both think and non-think modes, as you would know. Think mode allows the model to think a little bit more before answering. So it's a hybrid model. And what we did was we released the model with open weights. We also wrote a very deep technical blog for anybody else to replicate it. My own sense is that if you look at post-training, which is one of the key steps in training these models or alignment, this is on par with most things that are out there in terms of open source narrative of how to do it, right? So our first intent was, we have this internally, let's put it out. Let's also tell exactly how to do this, right? Because we are interested in, as you said, building the capacity for India to do this, right? There is a need for being able to have that independence in being able to do this, and we are on that journey. The model itself, just to your question, it performs very well on a range of math tasks, both simple and hard ones, and a range of programming tasks. It does very well on Indian languages, being able to mix English and Indian languages, being able to write Indian languages in Roman script. So that is what we have focused on. But we haven't yet even begun our effort towards the sovereign model, which will be a model trained from scratch of various sizes, which will outperform all of these models that we have today.
That'll be incredible and going to be a big leap forward for the country. Before we go to your sovereign model, in the current model, just maybe why don't you articulate some use cases which are very India specific that the global models are not able to do?
So I think what global models could do is a good question to ask. But I think the ability for us to be able to build models which think of language as a first construct, right? That you want it to be good in Bengali, you want it to be good in Marathi is important. In fact, we released the model now less than 2 days back, and people have already built things like somebody has built a nurse bot, right, in Marathi or in Bangla, I forget the language, and they are able to answer questions in Bangla while you think and reason about things in English. You make a very grounded things and put it together. Other people have been trying to understand how well it understands the political landscape of India and so on. The model is fairly grounded on things like that.
Yeah, for some reason, that's the first thing gets tested. You know, same as DeepSeek. You know, people who are really want to know what this model is allowed to say and what is not allowed to say.
Yeah, no, that is the way it is. It's somewhat theatrical, but I think it's useful. But to your point, the substantial use cases will involve access to technology in Indian languages. In fact, we took the JEE paper of this year, which by the way now comes in even Hindi, and we took the first math paper, because that's clearly it's a new benchmark altogether on Hindi. The first sheet of math, it got 7 on 7 answers. So you are able to ask a question in Hindi, and the model is able to give a good grounded answer in math. You should try it out. It writes it out also in Hindi and then puts it together. It is also a model where we have not just improved on accuracy, but worked on reducing the cost of serving. So we have actually optimized the model to be quantized and still accurate. In fact, in the blog also we talk about how to reduce the cost of serving it on a H100, and we can bring the cost down even more as we work, right? So as people try it on the playground, they'll see the speed of the inferencing. So in India, we'd also like to talk about making serving accessible and reducing the cost. So that's also something we are deeply focused on. Other use cases include people wanting to build, let us say, voice-to-voice systems. Often people build it with English models and put other components around it. The model is fairly good now to do Indian language to Indian language output while reasoning on a protocol of conversation that you have put out, right? It is also quite capable of combining the model's ability with a large knowledge bases. In fact, we have shown in the paper itself how if you add a particular knowledge base, the model outperforms even O3, which is a large reasoning model, on an challenging benchmark called Simple QA, which is a question answering benchmark. So we feel that there is a lot of opportunity for building small, efficient models, which are very good on reasoning, math, etc., and Indian languages, and they become interfaces to other components like web search and knowledge bases, and we get very grounded answers. So these are the use cases that we are thinking of.
That's excellent. You know, it's already sounding quite promising, and this is not even before you get to your full-fledged sovereign model, which I assume is going to be fairly large. You know, parameter-wise, I don't know if you already know it's going to be 70 billion, 100 billion more.
Yeah. So we are building 3 models. The experiments on exactly finding the parameter counts are happening, but the 3 models are something on the edge, something in this 20 to 30 billion parameter scale, with the intention that if you do FP for quantization, you can even run it on a 16 GB card that you may have on a laptop or a PC, and then another model that will be larger. This intention of the larger model is to be able to create data for other models, because we believe that the workhorse will be in that 20 to 30 billion range, with grounding, with additional tools, etc. But we will build a larger model to create pipelines for distillation, etc.
So that's interesting. In the past, there was this whole emergence of scaling laws for these models, and the number of parameters doubling every 6 months, and a lot of emergent properties. But you think it's stabilized where many tens of billions is where, as you're saying, it will be the workhorse for most use cases, and there's not race to get to few 100 billion, few trillion. Even I think Facebook behemoth is supposed to be massive in terms of a number of tokens, etc. But you don't think that's necessarily a vector on which the model capabilities will be measured on?
It won't be measured on that. It'll measure on the benchmarks. But to your question, that is a very important question. It looked like last year or so, a bit earlier than that, the larger you go with the models, the better it gets. But we have unlocked now other axes of scaling. One of them being reasoning, which is chain of thought thinking within the model itself. The model is able to spend more time in inference time and improve its abilities. The other one is deep research, where you can not just work with your own model's abilities, but with external tools, in this case knowledge bases, but could be other tools in the near future, which also is a scaling parameter that is doing well. So the point is, the smaller models are now far more capable, There will always be more complex tasks like creating high quality data, like being evaluators, which would need even larger models. But I think a range of practical applications as we scale out these systems to be population scale will use smaller models. There will, however, be a opportunity for mixture of expert models, which are very, very large, while keeping a fewer number of activated parameters. And one good thing that they would be able to do is compress the world knowledge and be the source of most of the knowledge. So there will be use cases, but I see a primary, the largest number of Gen AI tokens being deployed, being from the smaller models.
Got it. So Pratyush, you're clearly on the forefront of what's happening with the large language models, and I think a lot of people in India are also, literally rooting for you, because it's super important for Sarvam and other companies like Sarvam to be successful. Otherwise, we'll have a huge dependence on foreign models, and the way things are panning out is there is not going to be any application which doesn't have some element of intelligence inside this. And every time you are accessing this intelligence engine, you have to pay some fee for whoever is providing that service. And if all of them are not based out of India, one is there is a huge economic drain, but more importantly also a lot of strategic capabilities which may need to rely on these models, and the country perhaps may not have much control unless those models are of Indian origin. But let's go back to the beginning. I think you have been interested in the area pretty much since your BTech days. So just maybe let's just talk about that. How did your interest in AI, natural language processing, how did it develop? And you've been at it now for, I was going through your background, you can say nearly, if you count your BTech years, so almost 20 years that you've been, thinking about these topics.
So I was doing electrical engineering, which I think is a very good training for this area of science, because it gives you a training both in understanding the hardware aspects, right? Because this is actually a moment where hardware and software is coming together to reach enormous scale, but it also gives you a mathematical background that helps you think about how these large vector operations are happening. I was looking at reinforcement learning as part of my thesis at IIT Bombay, primarily to understand how you can use what is called Q learning, which is a kind of reinforcement learning algorithm earlier to optimize computer architecture. Right? So that's when I understood this topic, but frankly, it didn't hit me that this is what it is. Soon after, I went for a PhD where my intention was to study systems deeply, which is how do you build more performant systems, how do you build more reliable systems. And while I was doing that, there was a lot of stuff happening around AlexNet and other things. The GPUs of the day, which were meant for gaming, were being repurposed to do deep learning and so on. But frankly, it still didn't hit me that this is large. I joined.
The 2012 ImageNet movement did not shake you up and
did not shake me up. I mean, I saw that it was interesting, maybe because I was not as calibrated on how hard it was to make improvements with the usual algorithms, right? But that happened, and then when I joined industry, and then I was in IBM research. I was looking at what's happening. We're building things out, and then I realized, okay, this is looking interesting. This was a time when things were getting mainstreamed. It was getting into, hey, you can actually use PyTorch and build these systems. And I remember just sitting and hacking together something in PyTorch for small models and so on. And then it struck me that this is interesting. So I was reading up a lot about it and understood the impact, and then decided that this is so critical that we should, while you can build products in industry, I was thinking about a little bit more capacity in the country to do this, and decided to join IIT Madras and teach deep learning, right? And GPU programming and data science and statistics. So I created about 4 new courses in these topics, and in fact, with a colleague, Mitesh Khapra, we also taught deep learning at some major scale. About 60,000 students took the course.
Oh, amazing.
It was meant to be a fully hands-on course. I remember sitting and typing on Google Colab Notebook in these courses. It's about 60 hours. We try to keep it as affordable as possible, 1,000 rupees or so. And that experience was also good. We recognize that there's a deep need for this in the country. And so I mean, by the way, teaching is, by the way, a very, very solid training for oneself to understand something deeply. So that was also very useful. And then with Mitesh, we decided to start AI for Bharat, right? While we can create the capacity, you have to also create the place to do it. And the intention was to do deep learning for Indian settings. Initially, we tried to be broad-based. That didn't work out as well. So we said,
and before we go to AI for Bharat experience, so this is 2018-19. By the time the Transformer paper has come out, but OpenAI no one had heard of, although they were founded in 2015. Were you convinced in 2018-19 that AI is going down a path where it start to have significant impact, or it looked like just interesting technology that one should learn more about and build capacity through teaching and courses and so on? What was your perspective?
No, we had got that perspective that's going to be big. So, for example, the teaching thing, in a single semester, we reached out to 50 or 1,000 odd kids. We could have continued doing it, and there's a lot of demand for it. But we decided to focus back on building, because we saw there was Transformer, and then there was a further paper called BERT, which was also interesting. We said we should build, right?
Yeah.
In fact, my first master's thesis student was focusing on how do we build a web scraper, right? As simple as that sounds, because we realized that you have to go that way, right? So it was not cool to do that in academia, but we wanted to figure out Indian web. How do you even touch Indian web? How do you get it? How do you do all the pipelines required, right? So we understood it at that point. We didn't have, of course, the clarity that if you 1000x this, it just smoothly keeps scaling up. That we didn't have, but I think we recognized that Transformer, BERT, these things are going to scale up, right? In fact, we doubled down and quickly built Indic BERT. So on top of the data we collected from the web, we trained a model. BERT is essentially a transformer-based model, but does language modeling. It just predicts what language looks like and can be used for specific tasks as opposed to a general purpose model. And so, yeah, to your point, we did see that this is worth going deeper into.
Got it. And then that led you to start AI for Bharat as a non-profit initiative.
AI for Bharat was a lab at IIT Madras. With clear mandate, let's build AI for India. That's why it's there in the name, and build it in the open source and compete with the best models out there. It was different in the sense that we said we may not be interested in papers. What we're interested in is actually building systems which reach the quality that big tech has, right? And so it required infrastructure components like this data, web scale data, being able to get GPUs and build it out, etc. Right? Yes.
Got it. And how was AI for Bharat effort funded, and what was the scope? Like how long were you involved in AI for Bharat? From what I understand, the program is still running at IIT Madras. So just talk about what was going on in the early years of AI for Bharat.
Yeah, so it's good to also talk about what didn't work, right? So so we made Mitesh and I made some money from Padhai, which we wanted to invest. So we put it into AI for Bharat. One of the things we wanted to do was to create like an open ecosystem to innovate for India in AI. And we remember putting calls for projects and saying, can we do something in agriculture? Can we do something in traffic and so on? But we realized this is decentralized innovation. It's not easy to curate it very quickly. It'll take time. So we pivoted and we said, let's build it internally in IIT itself. We found a bunch of students and we said, let's build it as a group within IIT Madras. And we take a very specific focus. Let's focus on language. It was such an Indian problem. And the models were in that direction as well, right? So initially it was bootstrapped completely. And we spent about, and this is important to mention that this is, bootstrap, but frankly, IITs fund students, IITs have good students. So I think, in fact, it's worth calling out that IIT Madras has a good culture of students feeling that while they are doing the courses, they can do some cool stuff outside. That feeling is quite strong. So we bootstrapped it, and then we spent a year and built out a bunch of components. So we built out data sets, we built out an Indic BERT, and finally we built out Indic Trans, which is able to translate from one language to another. That was a use case, the first use case. And we were able to show that in the open source with replicable methodology and open data, you can match and even beat things like Google Translate. That became interesting. And then other people took notice. We were fortunate to have feedback from Mr. Nandan Nilekani, who then decided to fund it. Also fortunate to get funding from the government of India as part of the Bhashini project, which is already running. But there was a recognition that while algorithmic advances are being made, we need to think deeply about data. So we sort of like owned a data vertical within the Bhashini project, and that's how it started. And it's been going strong. So I was involved for over 3-4 years and continue to be involved in some capacity now. It has now sort of like it's a 200 plus organization now with research students, but also lots of language experts. So from across the country, we have language experts who are housed at AI for Bharat, right? And it is, and interestingly, AI for Bharat and Sarvam, we see it as a sister organizations. And today, the AI for Bharat team is deeply involved with Sarvam in building the foundation model, right? So, I mean, the research students who we are co-guiding, etc., they're all deeply involved. So we see that in some sense a continuation. Right?
Yeah, I think we need to see a lot more of that industry academia collaboration. Given that you have been, you've been from academia to industry, back to academia again to industry, right? So you're probably in a best situation to facilitate. And great to hear that IIT Madras and AI for Bharat group is deeply involved in Sarvam. Before coming to the how you thought about starting Sarvam, just where are we in terms of Indic languages and seamless translation? India obviously has so many languages. I think 15, 16 officially recognized languages, but probably no one knows the real count. But many hundreds, if not thousands, of dialects, all around the country. How far away are we from people from any part of India to be able to seamlessly converse with somebody else from other part of India where they don't understand one bit of each their language? Is technology getting close to the point where seamless conversation among any two individual, irrespective of their dialect and language, is going to be possible?
Yeah, I'm going to give a teaser soon. Maybe next week we'll have a new translation model that we are building at Sarvam together with AI for Bharat, which will be open sourced, and it is for 22 official languages. We have 22 languages per the constitution. But the story of Indian languages, but the real number, as you said, is in the hundreds, and the dialects are. I think it is unimaginably rich. We don't even recognize how in this country, in this geographical density of people, we have so many languages, so many scripts, so many ways of saying things. It's just actually, while we are doing technology, which is like mechanical, this feels very, very cultural, very rich, philosophical, and so on, right? To your question about how good are we, it's a case of a Pareto, right? Where there is what are called the higher resource languages, and then there are lower resource languages, and the tail is pretty long in the case of India. I think with the high resource languages, if you look at by usage, Hindi, Bengali, Tamil, to some extent the other languages, Marathi, etc., the top 4 languages, the models are fairly good, right? In fact, Sarvam M itself was trained with 10 languages, for which the data is fairly rich, and you would be able to ask a math question and get it answered. You would be able to translate a Marathi to a Tamil, right? And Odia to a Malayalam. So that works pretty well. In fact, we have pipelines to do even voice-to-voice translation, right? Yeah. So you could take a video that somebody is speaking in Hindi and actually get it spoken in 10 languages in their style, right? I think that the challenge comes after that because the participation of the other languages in the last 2 decades of the internet, which is what is fueling this era of AI, has been low, right? So there's not enough content there, and so it's important to be able to digitize and create and so on. What we will be releasing, you will find that about 15 odd languages, now it is in a very, very usable state. Beyond that, the mileage starts to vary, etc. But focused efforts to scale up are happening in that side, right? But I feel that translation is just emblematic of the problem. The broader thing is you want people speaking their language to participate in this technology, right? If there is a AGI coming, a lot of people should be part of it, right? It's just so important that people should be part of it, right? So hence voice becomes very important. We have been spending a lot of time on the voice side as well. And there also I can report that we'll be also open sourcing model in a couple of weeks time in voices also. For about 15 languages, we're in a good place. Still, even in the very top language, a recognition of Hindi or a Tamil is not on par with English, but it's getting there. It's getting close. Today at Sarvam, we are running millions of minutes of calls, and we're able to recognize things that people people say across the country, right? So, to your question, I think we are there for about 10 to 15 languages, but we need to extend it beyond that to reach everybody. A different point is that of culture. Language is just the interface, but all these languages, behind them there is culture, and capturing culture, digitizing content in that culture, all of these are things that will take more time. But the interesting thing is, if you had the tools, they become easier. If you had better OCR tools, digitizing old manuscripts become easier, and so on, right? So I see this as a self-reinforcing thing, but it is a journey that still remains to be taken.
Yeah, and I want to maybe double click on the fact that most Indian languages are also source of a lot of cultural heritage, a lot of accumulated ancient wisdom is kind of embedded in those language and so on. Where are we in terms of digitization of all the content that possibly exists theoretically for a particular language? And maybe there are two parts of it. How much of it is available digitally, and if it is available digitally, it is also available, I assume, to all international models as well. So a company like yourself, what kind of edge can you create? Because in some ways, you don't necessarily have access to proprietary data. Other people also have access to the same data. So both, there's a data that probably exists out there, but which is not digitized. And then therefore data is digitized. Is this level playing field for everyone, or you can somehow create an advantage for yourself?
A fair question. My sense is that at the level of knowledge, it should be widely accessible, right? So because Indian knowledge is, as you recognize, right? I think there is deep wisdom. In fact, in my mind think if everything's gonna get automated, we'll have nothing else to do but to read Indian wisdom. Right? That's what we'll all be focused on. I think
that's probably most optimistic outcome of this coming age AI revolution.
Yeah, in both ways, right? In terms of what technology will do and what humans will do. We may go towards a path where we become dumber and dumber, right? So we need to figure out how to do better. No, to your question about, firstly, where are we on digitization? Unfortunately, there is still a lot of silos, right? In terms of where is the data. There's lots of efforts by the government to digitize. There are lots of private libraries across the country. There are lots of book trusts and so on. And then there is the model side, the technology itself. In fact, we are also working deeply on OCR. Right, and we are finding that there is a lot of work to be done there. In fact, we are building multimodal models. Our models will be multimodal. They will be capable of digitizing content and so on, reasoning over text. I think there is work to do there, whether it is older scripts, whether it is handwriting, the models are not good enough today, right? They need to be improved. And in terms of bringing together people to share the content and have joint repositories, I think there is work to be done. But I feel that this should become a common. Just like there are lots of common repositories out there, Indian knowledge should be made common. In fact, that is important for us to sort of like position ourselves as what we bring to the table, right? So in that sense, I don't see that as differentiation. On your data point about differentiation, I see value in us focused on commercializing these models, seeing what they are put to use for, and using that to improve the models further. And that is why we have made one of the contrarian bets in Sarvam, to be not just playing at the models layer, but also thinking of applications. What can you build with it, and so on. I feel that's where it'll go, both directly, but also in partnership with organizations. In fact, what has happened now, since we put out a blog on sovereign LLM ecosystem, a bunch of companies have come to us and said, hey, we have data in this. Can we build a custom model? Whether it is healthcare, whether it's finance, whether it is vision companies. I feel that is the thing that we should create, because whether you look at the US, the large companies, whether it is Google, whether it is Meta, whether it is now OpenAI with ChatGPT, they have platforms which are able to then create sources of data which are more valuable than the source that they've started from.
Yeah, got it. So let's go back to starting of Sarvam. So at what point you felt that you want to come out of academia and co-found a company which will attempt to build these large language models, and what were you seeing at that time, and what gave you conviction that this is something, a game that one can play from India and potentially compete, because almost all players which are there, they are behemoths, right? They're giant companies with the able to invest, forget billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, which they're all investing. So what was what was going through your head and your co-founder, when you decided, okay, this is a challenge you guys want to take on?
Yeah, so I was spending some time with Microsoft Research, and I was seeing what is happening with the GPT stuff, right? Both in terms of its build out and also how Microsoft Research was reacting to it, right? Because there was a lot more direct access to what it is. There were clearly changes that were more drastic, right? So I was seeing that and realized that this is something.
This was
big.
22.
This was 22. Yes, this was 22, right? So, no, 23. 20 to 23. I was spending some time with Microsoft for about a year or so, and and then it looked like this. Yeah, of course there is. Yeah, so there was something that we built actually with. At AI for Bharat, we built a WhatsApp bot. This was 22, just after GPT-3 was launched. We built a WhatsApp bot, which was able to sort of like answer questions that farmers had on WhatsApp with voice, with AI for Bharat models plus GPT. And it was interesting that I was surprised, right? And that these models are improving so fast, and we used various models that we had created for voice and translation and so on, and that just made me feel that this needs to be built out, right? And we need to have an organization which can say, let me go and attempt to maximize my knowledge to replicate this independently. So that was the only metric, right? What all is required to go build that, right? We knew some things, but there are a lot of things we didn't know. And how do you build that? And then I met we have been working closely with Vivek for a while. Vivek, my co-founder, he has an interesting background of having done successful startups in the US and then come back and spend a decade building India's technology layer with Aadhaar and NPCI, UPI and stuff like that, and been an advisor to many bodies and so on. So he had that build for India kind of a mentality, and we were seeing this. So we said, let's go build this, right? Being from scratch will be a constraint. That we imposed on ourselves, right? You can very easily leverage existing models and build. We also placed a constraint of doing it in India for India, right? Again, not a contrarian one. India is thought of as a small market, etc. And the third thing we said is we'll have to figure out how we could work with the government, because at the end of the day, you need to be able to thinking of population scale impact, right? And so with these things, we said let's go start Sarvam and build a deep tech company in India. Then we were scouting for people, and many people are willing to come join. Yeah.
And it was clear to you from day one that it will eventually require raising humongous amount of capital, and somewhere you had the confidence that if you start building it, money will come eventually.
So I think the capital, and this was our thesis there, it has been proven a little bit right now, which is that you don't need that much capital in the billions of dollars to do it. Of course, you need tens of millions of dollars every year at least to build good models, right? But that's what happens, right? So once the technology curve is created, you can do it more efficiently. But I think this moves so fast that you'll have to at least double, triple that number to make it worthwhile, right? So we were just head on saying we need this technology, right? And we wanted to figure out who in the Indian ecosystem would invest in it, right? We also got feedback and also therefore decided to have the application layer because India in that sense was not as mature. If I went to a company and said, here is a model, do something with it, they wouldn't know what to do. So we invested a little bit in that layer and saying, can we create this flywheel where we are able to fund our own work because we put out this excellent technology out there. Yeah.
Got it. Now on the journey of Sarvam and building some of these models, so it's well known that all these models are in some ways almost as good as the access to data that you have. And I've been reading for last 12 months that pretty much all digital data on the internet has been consumed by pretty much all the models. I assume that's probably the case with you as well. Are we reaching a point where there's just no more data to train these models with, or there are pockets of data? I mean, definitely private data within the enterprise is one big source, but beyond that, what is accessible to companies who are building model that you are doing other companies? Where are we in terms of just access to more data?
It's a good question. Again, that's been a developing theme for the 12 months, like you said. At some point, people said, hey, we're running out of pre-training tokens or something like that. I think technically that doesn't sound as true in the following sense, right? You want these models to have a broad knowledge of most things out there. And there's enough data to create that broad knowledge. To your point, there are pockets of information that if you had, you would do better. Right, and some of these pockets are just very obscure, and some of them are being closed down. Right, for example, platforms like Reddit, Twitter, etc. They would not make their data available by themselves. Right, so some pockets are being closed down, and some are obscure.
Is Elon Musk has access to that data for teaching for training Grok?
I'm sure if it's your own company, probably you have your data for sure, right? No, but I think there are ways to access through APIs and so on that they're supporting. So in my mind, that was an issue, right? But it is not a P0 problem. Data that is common knowledge, general knowledge, is good enough. To your point, there is more value for domain-specific data. Do we have healthcare data? Do you have enough data about finance? Do you have enough data about legal? Do you have enough data about certain current affairs, etc.? Right? I think that is where there is more work to be done, and that is where it comes down to the value loops being created by domain leaders, right? A healthcare company in India which understands Indian longitudinal healthcare data can do much better, right? So that is one point. The second point I just want to say is that these models are slowly becoming interfaces to tools and knowledge, right? That's one way of looking at them, and there they become, let's build great, small, effective reasoning engines. And let them have access to tools and knowledge to do things, right? And that shifts the focus to a system, a composite of system, right? So it's not just the model. And the composite system should be built in the context of a use case, right? Like for a great example is coding, right? So what do you do with coding that can improve these models? Not only do you make it good for coding, you show it the world's code, etc., but then you think of building agentic systems on top, do multi-step stuff, build good UI. It moves to that layer, right? So I don't think pre-training text is, it is a challenge. It's a challenge, and we are working very hard on that. But I think domain-specific data and then systems around it are more interesting.
What is your viewpoint on government potentially, playing a more active role in at least the indigenous data and Indian origin data? Even if you look at just say YouTube or Twitter, huge number of Indians are on this platform. They engage, they generate a lot of data signals, and then there's a whole source of, there is a lot of indigenous data in various archives and so on, and then proprietary data within various organization. Is it like too much to hope that somehow government should be able to bring all these actors together and make a kind of more central mandate to pool in all this data for the larger benefit of the country, and which can create also sustainable advantage for a company like yourself and anyone else building indigenous models, or is this too much of a naive thinking on my part?
That's a very important question. So Gen AI feeds on scale, right? I think that is, and there are different ways people can get to that scale. I think in China, maybe a government mandate achieves that scale, right? In US, it has been very large companies which have large surface areas that can create that scale for themselves. I think we should think of an alternative that India can show, right? And there is technical stuff here. There is ecosystem stuff here to be innovated on to make it happen, right? So I don't think it is naive, but I see two broad challenges, right? One is in India we are touchy about capitalism still. Okay? So you just use the word benefits to companies like you, and immediately there's a reaction that this is being done with a certain interest to create value pockets, right? I think the value pocket is for the country, and we do not recognize how much we are draining out as a country when there are so many creators building content that is feeding the next generation, video generation model, etc. Right? We are just working to create that structure, and the value drain there is huge. But we have sort of like, as a country, firewalled that thought process that this is what it is. And if there is an Indian company doing something, we're very touchy about it. That's a separate point, but that's a cultural thing. But the second point I would still say is that the government is thinking right along these directions around both data and compute, but we are multiple magnitudes away from the reality, right?
Yeah, I think this is, you briefly alluded to that, but I want to just, further emphasize. And I've kind of, in my entrepreneur journey, I've seen it from the front lines. Let's say, how dominant Google and Facebook are in India. Now, we all know, like, in China, the Google of China is Baidu, but Google of India is Google. Facebook of China is WeChat. Facebook of India is Facebook. And so on for every platform. So in the same around last 20 years, China has figured out a way to both collaborate with these companies, get them to invest huge amount of money, and yet protect domestic companies and create a level playing field. And today these companies are as competitive. Amazon of China is Alibaba. Amazon of India, fortunately, you have Flipkart. Which probably could have benefited from some protection, but at least they are there and still the largest player. But not too many examples, and as a result, all of us collectively are paying huge rent to these platforms today. If I start a company, I have no choice but to advertise on Facebook and Google. So me as an Indian company, to acquire Indian customer, I have to pay these international platform, otherwise I can't survive. And the risk in AI is even more pronounced if we get to like fast forward 5-6 years from now, and there is not a single use case which can work without leveraging some kind of inference engine. And if all of those inference engine are foreign owned, foreign controlled, we'll be in a pretty sticky wicket. And I think the only real moat I can see is the Indian origin data. And unless there is a strong effort, which is not driven by very parochial interest of who wins, who loses, but how does country win in this? Right? I think that's. I hope there is a lot more conversation about that, and I think it can create. I really believe it can create a huge leg up for Sarvam and other Indian LLM companies, and probably a topic that people should think very seriously about, irrespective of who wins and loses.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So my sense is that we as a country have always, historically, absorbed good things that have come from wherever, right? And I think these companies that we mentioned, they build good stuff, and I think we leverage it. But what we should also think about is our the word is, we don't want to decouple, right, from anybody. I think we are great users, we are great global citizens, right? But we should think about strategic autonomy. If you wanted to, can we build a search engine today, right? If we wanted to, can we build an LLM today? So I think that is something that we should build, and it's almost like saying, what is the R&D spend of the country? Because even if you didn't make money on it and you did these things to show that you have the capability, research would improve. There would be more feeling of confidence in the local companies to innovate, right? And this is a flywheel, right? So India can take a different approach, I feel, rather than the hard approach of China or just completely doing what we're doing now, where we say, just like Aadhaar, right? It's a great example. We said, okay, people said you can't build biometric for the country, and we built it, right? And we use components from elsewhere, we use GPUs, we use algorithms and so on, but we built it, right? I think that is useful and to do as a country, and especially in the current geopolitical scenario, when there is greater intent, greater interest to think about these things, we should have positive energy to do this, get more people back, and build some of this. But as you said, there are structural things we should think about.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a very important point that can we build a search engine today? I think 2 years ago answer would have been absolute no chance. But search engine itself is getting disrupted with these more intelligence-driven synthesized search. Like for most of youngsters, they don't go to Google anymore; they go to GPT, and GPT is able to give dramatically better answer than having to go through 20 documents and figuring out what's relevant. So maybe these questions are interlinked as we transition from the last era of internet, mobile phone type of compute and applications to LLM powered applications. It's a reset moment, and there is an opportunity for country to maybe think maybe now it becomes possible to dream. Look at example of Perplexity. They are giving Google pretty much pretty good run for their money, because this whole the search paradigm is very different when you look at from LLM first point of view. So maybe there are possibilities, but all of that require that India has indigenous models that we have full control on, and we can let all these other innovation and applications emerge around that.
Yeah, so I think the model is one of the layers, right? I think that the whole stack is up for discussion, right from hardware onwards, right? What is our hardware play? If you look at CCTVs today, I was just discussing with various people, we don't use our chips in CCTVs even, and most of our data probably goes outside from security cameras. This is the maximum security risk that you can have, right? So hardware is already a thing. On top of it, there are models. Then there is products. We have great product engineers in the country. The challenge is we need to have playgrounds of innovation. Companies in India that are large must think of, okay, if there's a product on Gen AI from an Indian company, can I think of using it and thereby aiding that process of innovation? Because what will come in the next generation is even better, and they'll be closer to me and they'll help me out, rather than asking for a free POC, right? I think that is the other challenge, because even if there's a great product leader today, he'll say, let me go to Silicon Valley, I'll pick a 100K check from somewhere and build a product, right? Which you could do here today, right? So across the layers, I think it's just models is of course a very important layer, but across layers we have the opportunity.
Let's focus a bit on where are we going. I mean, this is a pretty seismic shift. There has been so much hyperbole around AI that it is as big or bigger than internet and electricity and steam engine and so on. Where are you on that? As you've been obviously watched this from sidelines for nearly 2 decades now. I shouldn't say sidelines, both you've been pretty close to this field and seen it evolve in front of you. Is all this hyperbole about how AI is going to completely change the world fully justified?
There will always be hyperbole, so we'll have to separate that out. But especially given the investment that some people are making in this, right? But this is a major change. I don't think, I think we will be wrong to underestimate it. It could be even larger than what it is, because whether it is access to information, whether it is creation of information, whether it is access to intelligence, all of this are going to be intermediated through this. How will computers of the future look like, right? How would schools of the future look like, hospitals, all of them? How will weapons of the future look like, right? So all of these will be dramatically changed, right? So initially, people thought it is just one more technology, but now it's going to pervade everything. There'll be mobile phones that are LLM first. There will be laptops that are LLM first. There will be companies that are built thinking an AI first strategy and so on. 4-5 member companies running something today that is run by 1,000 people, genuinely possible. There will be job losses on that account. And I think much of what we think of as the cost of software will change, right? And it'll also affect flow of information, discovery of truth, all of those things, right? So it's actually massive, right? And we should not underestimate it. We should actually accelerate the positive sides of it significantly. So I feel that AGI or no AGI doesn't matter, but I think the impact this will have on people will be quite significant, and because people have been so hyperbolish about it, there might be a tendency of fatigue. I've been hearing for a year, kya ho raha hai, kuch to nahi hua, kind of thing. But I think that is a mistake, right? We, by the way, have compressed 30-40 years into 3-4 years. You can't expect 3 months, even if people want you to. But people who think of a 5-year arc would see that this is going to be very big.
Yeah, I've been using GPT pretty regularly, and now it has become an integral part of, like how Microsoft Office was. It's it's such a powerful resource. I'm able to get very synthesized information. I actually used to read a lot. My entire reading time has shifted to GPT because I'm able to consume a lot more information and go from here to there and there to there. Historical context to other parallels and so on. And one of the things I've seen, you can see it is getting significantly better in every iteration. I'm pretty sure, and that's true for Claude. A lot of people are using Claude for all the coding, etc. And most companies are seeing 20, 30, 40% improvement in the coding. So if you extrapolate all this, I just want to basically go back to your point about things may not appear, changing dramatically in 3 months. But even if you compare today from where 3 years ago, I don't think anybody would have heard of GPT by at that time. And today, I don't know how many users they have, but it's a massive number of users. Most companies are changing their roadmap, etc. And 3 years in a larger arc of history is nothing. So if you fast forward this from 2025 to 2030, by all accounts, looks like things are going to be dramatically different. But at least I personally have only one open question: is like the Moore's law for chips, number of transistor doubling 18 months has gone on for nearly 60 years now. How, and you've been AI researcher, so you're probably in a better position to comment on this. It is reasonable to expect that these LLMs will keep getting better in a linear mode. At some point, we'll run into limits to scaling laws, etc., and which will require more innovation and very different type of models. Jan LeCun is pretty big influencer, and every forum he says that LLMs will be dead in 5 years, which gets people's attention. And like a point he's trying to make is that the only way we leapfrog from here to there is fundamentally new innovation in the architecture of how we are approaching AI. So where are you on that? Smooth 5-year improvement just on the current LLMs with more and more data and better algorithms and distillation and whatnot, or fundamental new breakthroughs?
Yeah. So what has happened is, as I was saying, the levers of scale, we have been discovering new ones, right? Again, they are frankly first order ideas, chain of thought thinking. I give it more time to think, right? It's like what you will tell a child, thoda soch lo then answer, right? That's a lever. Deep research, keep reading things, come back, right? Even to some extent what we are doing with RLVR, right? Reinforcement learning. These are simple first order ideas. But the important thing is that this whole effort is happening at a scale of compute which is so high on the right side that the lottery hypothesis around finding transformers that work well for this architecture is carrying us, right? What is going to happen next is, or what is already happening is, people combining this with systems of systems, right? So I combine this with the agent that does this, that I can do coding this way. In fact, I'm very excited about if you combine this with an organization and how they function, what all is possible, because real ROI unlock happens there, right? At the same time, I fully agree with Jan, right? To an academic that is rigorous and philosophical about it, these ideas will look like first order ideas, engineering hacks even, right? Just happening at an extreme scale with extraordinary outcomes, right? And there will be opportunities for deeper ideas in terms of the architecture, in terms of how we present information, in terms of grounding on the physical world as opposed to grounding on text, etc., right? And some of that is starting to happen, and that is what is crazy about it, right? So we think of this as taking away knowledge jobs, but I see physical work also being very easily automated by this, right? At a massive scale, right? So almost factories creating factories kind of stuff, right? So I have no doubt that there will be more ideas, but at the same time, I don't see that this is stopping in a year or so, because we are hitting some wall. If you can measure something which looks like you can keep optimizing that deeply until the next set of things are found to sort of optimize it further and so on.
Got it. So next few years we can expect for the same pace of progress to continue?
I think so. And I think the primary benefits will come from more people getting involved in this rather than just the model improving. It will be the systems and organizations and hopefully nations improving. Right?
There was, as LLM started to break out, there was this emerging thought process at some point that domain specific models will have their role to play. But by all looks, it seems like the general purpose models are better than even in things like health or education or something else. Do you think there are opportunities for I'm asking more from India context, for people to build health specific LLMs or any other domain industry specific LLMs, or larger models are just going to win in pretty much everything?
That's a good question. At some point, people indexed a lot on that, right? But what has happened is the general purpose models themselves are becoming more capable, and capability automatically has to include things like health, etc., which people care about. And when you combine them with general purpose things like web search, it brings a lot of ability right away, right? You can access the best knowledge in healthcare and answer and so on, right? Having said that, where it will matter is not, model is a consequence, is data sets. If you have data sets in some kind of imaging for healthcare over a longitudinal period, that these frontier models don't necessarily have. So that if you translate to a custom model that is accurate on that workflow, I think that'll make a lot of sense, right? I'll give an example of what we were doing with Niti Aayog, where we were finding that if you want the policymakers to get disintermediated in thinking about the data, right? So see, today there's a lot of gap between a policymaker and data. So there we found that if you just use an LLM and try to do this, even a frontier model, if you have lots and lots of tables which have very specific context of India and the demographic and so on, the ability of the models to do it right was very low. But if you figure out ways to improve the system, fine-tune it, etc., you can really go from something like 30% to 80+%, right? So there will be the engineering and the somewhat model effort to take a frontier model for a particular task, get it very accurate, right? And there will be need for aggregation of domains. I think healthcare, education, these are good examples. Even agriculture, geospatial, etc., where there is enough data on which you can build models which are better for narrow contexts.
Yeah, but what is the most optimal path forward? And you mentioned at Sarvam, you guys are trying to be more vertically integrated and looking at applications. A lot of people in India are building application, including some of the stuff I am involved in at my venture studio, Meraki Labs. And mostly these application right now, how most people are approaching is, you have a base model, preferably Sarvam, at least in Indian context, and then you use Sarvam as kind of your intelligence inference engine, and you build your interfaces, some domain knowledge, etc. Are there examples where these entrepreneurs should think of also going vertical, full stack in some ways, and build their own custom domain models, or they're better off fine tuning, if they have access to proprietary data, start with Sarvam as the base model, fine tune it further, and then build on top of that?
I think depends on the maturity of the organization. I definitely think there are examples where large enterprises and large organizations must be fine tuning on their internal data. There's just so much of context that is not democratized. That's all over the place, right? And this needs to be brought together and built into custom models. I think that to me it is a matter of the quantum of the data and the specificity of the use case and the repeatability of it. If you're going to do only 10,000 calls on a day, then maybe it's a different thing. If you're doing millions, it matters a lot more, right? But my own view is that just like pre-training of these models looked like very, very hard 2 years back, and now more companies are able to do it. I think fine-tuning and building custom models, what is called continuous pre-training and then fine-tuning, these recipes will become more accessible, right? In fact, one of my interests is to be able to build course material to show how this can be done, right? And more organizations can then say, I can do this. I have now 100 billion tokens, which is my company's data or my domain's data. I can take this base model, I can do continual pre-training and then fine-tuning for my tasks, and I have something that is working. This will become more and more accessible, right? And I see this as the value loop. I have data, I built it. In the process, I built talent and model. The next set of data, next model, I can do this as well. And just like you're suggesting, India should do this, I think companies should do this. In my data, can I do this, etc. And it'll definitely be there. But there will be need for some very large things. For example, take drug discovery, right? You must be seeing what DeepMind is doing in that area of proteins. Take weather forecasting. Take accelerating science. Let's say we have many people do computational fluid dynamics. You can accelerate that. Take materials discovery. There's a lot of data in scientific journals here and there. My wife works in material science. It is actually a hard work to discover a new material, which is a composition of certain metals for an alloy and so on. And you can make this much, much better. So I think in strategy, or take even strategic sector, right? There's kind of data that we have, take satellites. So I think these are the places where we should take mission statements that goes beyond a company or an organization and look at it broadly and see how we can build models.
I want to ask a question from Indian AI ecosystem point of view. Now you are clearly at the forefront, and it'll be great to see Sarvam continue to do well. But do you think we have the whole entire AI innovation ecosystem in India is also taking off simultaneously? And the reason I ask is, I feel that there are, what is generally accessible to an entrepreneur is to find a use case and build something light on top of an existing model and try to find product market fit, which is also needed, but that is not going to lead to, people attempting drug discovery and new materials and acceleration of science and whatnot. How do we, does that worry you? How do we catalyze this whole ecosystem further to really have deep AI companies in India?
No, it worries me a lot. And see, because of the direction this is taking, both as a technology and globally, right? To me, there is one thing around venture risk, and people saying, "I know what to build, and I can build a company." Then there is risk that organizations can take, right? Why aren't people putting some percentage of their profit and saying, "Let's start an AI incubation inside. I'm doing a generic drug manufacturing. At least we should have an LLM that is somewhat capable of looking at all the data there is and doing it, right? Or I am running the biggest legal practice in the country. What should we do in LLMs for law in India, right?" I think large existing private companies should be thinking of that, and maybe somebody should make a very articulate case for it, that this is really why you should do it, and then have like you're doing the design studio with Medic Labs. You should probably, I think one possibility is to help these organizations think what that journey looks like. They have not done it in the past, right? And the third thing is the government, right? And the government has begun thinking about this in the India AI mission, but I think we are a couple of orders of magnitude more work to be done, right? So I think it is across the thing, and in fact goes even lower, right? So in universities and students and so on, what should they do? In fact, any course that is taught today, it's good to have a week saying that what can you do with Gen AI with this, right? Anyway, assignments are being done with these models, right? So I feel it goes across the board, and I think we need more capacity in helping people make the 0 to 1 journey and thinking about it, but it cannot all be venture risk, right? Because that is under the pressure of PMF and return on capital. By the way, just having a pool of patient capital in India to make this happen, I think it's a very solid bet, right? Somebody should be saying that you have invested so much in all kinds of risky things. AI is so important. Let's have a patient pool of capital. That I think also is.
So this is very interesting. New point. You are just giving me also some food for thought. Let's take a private company which maybe has a today their P&L looks like 10% EBITDAs. Now they may feel like the profit has to improve every quarter, but they are perhaps not realizing that unless they make a transition to be truly being AI first company, someone else will take away the entire profit pie. Instead, you take 1 or 2% of that and start investing in proactively and figure out a way to tell the story to your shareholders or public market, how you are investing in AI first. And with that capital, you can create, some advantage for your company and some edge, and you will be in some way future proof. But it requires different type of thinking, in some ways, almost like thought process, at least slightly disrupting yourself. But if you hold on to the 10%, EBITDA and which can't drop by 1 rupee, then you are in some ways also positioning yourself to be sitting duck for eventually somebody Indian or outside, who will be probably approaching your market differently.
I think that is a grounded research on that. I think is worth writing. I don't know who the people are with the ability to do it. I fully agree with your argument, right? And I think this is not a socialist requirement; it's a capitalist requirement. Right? They're just multiplying the probability of what happens over a period of time and seeing what it looks like 10 quarters down the line rather than next quarter, right? But yeah, I think I fully agree with what you said.
Yeah, maybe before we get to a grounded research, at least getting your top 100, 200 CEOs in India and saying you've read enough, about AI. You have played enough with GPT. Like, are you willing to put 10% or 20% of your profit back into AI? Only then you are serious.
Yeah, I would start with 1%. That's a good number to start with.
Right.
And you would find that you can do amazing things, even just with that, right? And again, the capacity build out in the company. In fact, while we are talking so much about government, I think this is the place to start. Because there are profit pools and there is value being created in India. We just have to direct it towards this long-term arc rather than short-term, so that we don't fall prey to what happened in the last 2-3 decades.
Absolutely. You earlier, you mentioned AGI. Can you help break it down? How much of this is just, fantasy and hype? Say, look, I also long time ago studied computer science. I don't understand technology at very detailed level, but I understand LLM enough to know, it just at some level, these are just, those, your 24 billion parameters are numbers, the weights that are, learned from training through humongous amount of data, but these are just plain numbers just sitting there until someone fires a query to it and the weights are computed and output comes out. And output is also, while the output may look very impressive, it's just predicting next token. That's all it does, and just token is not even a word, right? It's just perhaps half word or 2/3 of a word and so on. from there, I find it very hard to extrapolate something we call artificial general intelligence only emerging from this. Seems like, at least the intelligence architecture of our brain is not even fully understood. Forget about replicating that. So for me, it seems like, AGI is, it doesn't even make sense to talk about it. But then there are people who are, way more informed than I am. They really feel, including Dario at Anthropic and, many others, it's just around the corner. How do you, where do you stand on this?
Yeah, it's. I think it is one of those questions that spans technology, philosophy, and also to some extent this heated investment bubble. Right? So I think it's in that sense become a bit complicated. I have 2 points. One is that there is a very mechanical way of doing it, which is to say, here are the tasks I care about. Here is a typical whatever baseline, could be a human baseline, and here we are, and here is what AGI is, right? If you said here are the 50 tasks I want, writing poetry to solving problems to doing this, etc., and here is the baseline I did with 1 million people, and I am better than that. That is like a very mechanical definition. Well, whatever you thought a human could do, when this is able to do in some way, right? And in that, by the way, again, we tend, because we are a little probably tired of hearing about all this, we don't see it. Like, for example, a 24 billion model, which can fit actually into your graphics card that you can use on a PC, is solving JEE problems 7 on 7, when in the hardest exam of undergrads, right? This is good benchmark, right? And these models are capable of doing that, right? And so productive work, how much of it that we are doing which machines cannot do, what are we learning? These are good questions to ask in consequence to that, right? But I have actually the exact opposite question, and that is what I tend to worry that we don't focus on, which is, you mentioned about, hey, these are numbers sitting and they're giving out numbers and 1/3 of a word or 2/3 of a word and so on, right? What are we doing, right? So
we, our intelligence, what is our brain doing?
Yeah, so our intelligence, we tend to glorify it. What I'm able to say, what you're able to say, what you're able to think, what you're able to process, solve, intelligence, right?
You're saying maybe we are also doing next token prediction.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that we have a very high impression of our intelligence, right? Whereas the real thing is experience. We have experience and we have consciousness, which is important. The intelligence, if we hold on to that, that is a thin straw. Right?
But are you decoupling consciousness from intelligence?
Yes, absolutely. In my philosophical grounding, they are completely different.
Say things. More, like why do you think that?
So I think intelligence is something that happens in the field of awareness, right? And awareness and consciousness is the grounding, and that's very different from being able to solve a task. By the way, if you hold on to the fact that you are able to solve a task well, or do a podcast well, or write code well, we are goner, right? In 5 years, we are gone, right? So that particular task is gone. What is still, however, very unique and never possible in the artificial world is awareness, right? Models can become extremely self-reflective. They can ask themselves, what is it, and so on. But it is just silicon flowing around, right? The ground of awareness is not there, right? And that is why they can never feel pain. They're not conscious beings and so on. So that's why I said it's spread across philosophy and technology and also this. And that is why I feel that while this is the next 4 or 5 years of arc is looking like economic benefit around this, the 50-year arc to this is about what is being human, right? And there we have the best answers already, right? And we need to figure those things out. Yeah.
Do you meditate or read about ancient Indian philosophy?
I used to do both. Okay. I just, given what's happening now,
taking all your time.
It's a bit hectic, but yes, I do spend some time.
Yeah, no, I think what this distinction you're drawing from consciousness and grounding and so on, I think it's goes to the heart of Indian philosophy, and whatever little I have learned, I think this whole that even those 4 Mahavakyas, one of them being Aham Brahmasmi and all that, this whole idea of cosmic consciousness and also on, it has been thought through. I think both thought through at a very deep philosophical level, as well as summarized into very few statements that it's available to us, and perhaps that's probably, as you're saying, we'll have more time to contemplate about these things, and maybe we had head start because of thousands of years ago, a lot of people did all the work and thinking and translated into scriptures and practices, so that a lot of us also have access to a path into that through starting with a maybe simple meditation. But coming back to this 5-year and 50-year thing, and what you just very confidently said that whether writing code or doing podcasts or all of this will be just go away as a task in 5 years, but that also has a tremendous societal implication.
Yes.
Because the whatever, first of all, it's not clear what the alternate jobs are going to be. Even if they are there, it takes a while to create all of those. And then even if AI ushers in the era of prosperity, but it's about who are the owners of that prosperity. We've seen the past in pretty much all technological evolution has only increased the gap between haves and have-nots. That also very much here and now worry if all these jobs are likely to go away in 5 to 10 years. We are entering into pretty unknown territory.
Yeah, that is true. And again, because we have gotten tired of this narrative for 1-2 years, we might not be paying attention to it. And again, there is need for thinking in the medium term and looking at what this implication is. In my mind, so I really respect what Jio did with bringing the mobile broadband to the country, right? It brought utility that is available broadly, right? Of course, different private companies, depending on the nature of things, would benefit from it, right? But today you can say that in a rural village somewhere, there is access to internet, right? And of course, other companies like whether it's Airtel and others have also continued to invest in that, right? I think firstly, we should ensure there is availability, right? If indeed this is coming and taking away jobs, we at least need to provide our people the ability to benefit from it, right? If they don't even have it and somebody else has it and they're doing better, that's even worse, right? So I think the first thing is availability. The second thing is conscious design for medium term. And I don't think any one person or organization fully understands it, right? And therefore it requires broad thinking, right from what do we teach children, how do we think about job market, security, all kinds of things like that, right? And sometimes the business inertia that we will feel will slow things down a bit, but the trend is clear, right? And I think we have to design for it.
And speaking of that, just embracing AI in all walks of life, one of the things I think you publicly talk about is AI consumption per capita. What is the thought process? What do you mean by that, and why is that important?
As I said, right, see, if AI is going to displace jobs, it's primarily because it provides organizations with abilities which they don't need individuals specifically for, certain individuals. So those abilities need to be given to individuals directly, right? So you should be able to say, if I wanted to access, like you said, access knowledge, historical, this should be available to people. If I wanted to have help in understanding a particular topic, I should have help on it. If I wanted to understand how to deal with the healthcare problem I'm seeing but don't have anybody around me, I should be able to access a free system that's capable of answering that to me, right? Or even deeper stuff. I mean, even more, let's say, less deeper stuff, like let's say e-commerce and so on, right? Instead of it benefiting just in the companies, which will then have their thing around it, how can we have fiduciary agents which represent the interest of individuals, right? And how do we do that? So to me, if indeed it pans out the way it is, we should think of it as a general purpose utility, just like we think of as power, electricity, or we think about, let us say, access to healthcare, education. We should see access to compute of this kind being common. And that's why it's important to do certain things like, how do we get it to the edge? How do we have enough capacity in the country to serve the tokens for the whole country needs? All of these become then important.
Yeah, Pratyush, listening to you and also kind of thinking, I realized that at some point in all the people who are in the position of influence in the country, whether they're in a government or CEOs of large companies, I know they all pay attention to headlines and attend conferences and talk to experts, and then go back to business as usual. They really need to be shaken out of their comfort zone and saying, look, there is this whole tsunami of change just headed our way. It is still going to take few years and maybe plus minus 4 years, 5 years or 10 years, but it's most definitely coming. People need to really, really take a pause, take a break from their job for a week or 2 weeks, and really come to terms with it. Otherwise, you talk about this, you feel, intellectually excited, go back to doing the things you were doing before, and that's, just not enough given what's coming our way, right?
No, that's why I was very grateful for you to have created a forum. We did recently in ISC, you got people together. I also agree with that. And I'm very thankful that you are taking that lead. Maybe you should take that even further, because it's not just being shaken outright. We need a playbook.
Yeah.
What do we do about it, right? And it has to become actionable. And there should be some good ideas that should be put together on what people can do. But yeah, I fully agree that this needs to happen, and this needs to happen widely and quickly for us to be ready.
Okay, I'm going to brainstorm on this topic more with you offline, and we'll figure out, what needs to be done. But I want to thank you, Pratyush, for really taking almost like leading the country in many ways to, first of all, show that conviction that even something as cutting edge as large language models can be done in India, can be done very frugally. I really liked, you are not saying, give me many $1 billion so I can do it. Saying even with, few tens of millions of dollars, which is probably 1% of what, global large companies are, spending on, and you are building something which is competitive, is keeping India in the game and creating the option value of being able to double down at any time when, it comes to that. So I think it's very important for the country that you are immensely successful. It's also very important for youngsters to take, inspiration from what you are doing and saying, we, in the modern India, we can do anything we want to do. We don't need to stick to only subpar things, which can only be done 3 generations behind in terms of technology maturity, but we can be at the forefront. So more power to you. We'll continue to cheer for you, and look forward to talking to you more, Pratyush. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mukesh.
At SparX, we aim to bring to you stories of exponential impact. We share in-depth analysis of what goes behind success stories. If you find our conversations interesting, you can join us by subscribing to our YouTube channel. You can also listen to SparX on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or any other audio platform of your choice. If you have any suggestions on who we should invite or what topics we need to cover, just let us know in the comments. We are always listening, looking for ways to improve, and keep getting better as we go along.